find out about our little bubble in Dutchess County?
Yes, well, I've known about, I feel like I'm so loud, I'm really loud. I've known about Millbrook School actually for a very long time because my sister-in-law, sitting right next to Lily, Mimi Hills, graduated from Millbrook. I have no idea what year, 86? 88, okay fine, 88. So we always knew about Millbrook School, and I'd always heard amazing stories about the zoo, but I never knew exactly what she was talking about. And then we were looking at schools for my daughter, and it was during COVID actually, so it was very difficult to visit boarding schools. And this friend of mine, whose daughter had just graduated from Millbrook, was like, "You should go look at Millbrook." And I was like, "Millbrook, okay, sure." So I called the admissions office and spoke to Meg, and I got so lucky because it was COVID, and we got an interview, and we went up and with our masks on and walked around campus, and we fell totally in love with the school, and it's such a magical place, as all of you know. And we were so grateful for our time at Millbrook.
I love that. So, you know, in your eyes, we always talk about like, what makes Millbrook Millbrook? So for you, what makes Millbrook Millbrook?
I mean, honestly, for me, like every single time you like turn onto the road, school road, whatever it's called, I should know the address off the top of my head from sending over so many packages, 131 School Road. I can't believe I forgot that. But the minute you turn on that campus, there is just a magic that happens, you know, and you drive through the marshes and then you go over the bridge, and it's just this like incredibly special, small, intimate, yet very diverse and rich community. And, you know, I think that just one of my, well, there's so many favorite moments I had at Lily's time at Millbrook, but one was the chapel, you know, and I think the chapel for me really articulates the entire essence of that school, you know, and there's so much great community building that goes into that, and you feel safe there, you know, you feel safe and supported even as a parent, you know, and such great relationships with all the teachers, all of Lily's friends. It didn't matter the grades, and in terms of grades of who the friends were in, but it was incredible.
Yeah, I think my mom was talking about when we visited Millbrook, it was like the first time we saw the top of the chapel from Route 6 or whatever that street is. You know, you're just like, wow, what is this place? And then you go down School Road, and you know, once you get there, you have to kind of try to find your place with your friends. But I think one thing that we get out of that is you're building your leadership. You're building how to be a leader amongst your peers, and you use those skills, you know, once you leave and once you go to college and once you start your career. So when you think about all of the places, amazing places you've worked, L'Oreal, The Body Shop, Louis Vuitton, you know, how has your definition of leadership evolved over the years?
I think probably for me, leadership, I feel like the defining moment for me of like really understanding what it means to be a leader was actually when I was at The Body Shop, which some of you may not even know the brand in this room, but others may know it very well. But it was an incredibly very successful brand back in the 80s and 90s, and it was founded by this woman, Anita Roddick, who was a pioneer at the time. And the poor brand really, she sadly passed away suddenly 6 months after L'Oreal acquired the brand, and really when she passed away, the spirit of that brand died at the same time. And so when I came into the business, we were really charged with restarting the brand and reigniting the future and the passion and all the energy that went behind it. But I had to move the offices from North Carolina to New York City, basically by myself. And there were like 3 people that were coming with the brand. By the way, I had 420 retail stores, so it wasn't a small business or operation. And we were taking 3 people with us to New York. And I'll never forget that moment in our New York office. And there were 3 people. I was like, oh my God. And it's in that moment that I realized like a leader really is about your team and the people around you. And it's really how you can empower them to take the business, take their teams, take their ideas to the next level versus you having to push and drive the ideas that comes from them.
So would you describe that as like a pivotal moment where you had to shift a whole team from North Carolina to New York? And then how do you kind of use that background of that moment there in what you're doing today? I
use it every day, honestly, and I always say to anyone who asks me, you know, people that, you know, call and want to talk about my career, and any advice I have for them is that, you know, when I was offered this opportunity to go to The Body Shop, I had no interest. I was like, I'm not going to do that. You know, this brand is what? You know, it's old, it's dying, like there's nothing there. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I take those moments of when I had to work so hard and build something so quickly, or it was going to literally fall apart with me every single day. And it makes me, A, grateful for what I have today, and B, it makes me really realize that every single detail is so important, and how you really build the fabric of those details is what makes success in the end.
So I think that's interesting when you talk about building teams and cross-collaboration and cross-functional leadership. So how do you think that, across creative sales and retail teams, how do you manage all of those different people? How do you manage those teams so that they collectively have one set goal and they're able to accomplish that?
Yeah. Well, interesting, because when I arrived at Louis Vuitton, even though it's a brand that's been around since 1854, so it has a very strong legacy and heritage, but actually when I arrived at the brand, it had maybe more traditional ways of working. So everybody worked in very siloed functions and very siloed ways, and one of the first things that I did was take my leadership team, which we're French, even though I don't speak a word of French, so we call it a codir. And we went and did an offsite together. And the offsite, the main purpose was really about breaking down those barriers and those silos in order to work more fluently together. And it's amazing because the first time I arrived, we'd have these codir meetings and nobody would talk. You'd walk in and be like, hi everyone, how are you? And people would like, say nothing. And now you walk into these codir meetings and everyone is like chatting, how was your weekend? What are you doing? What do you have this week? And so first was just to really break it down and make everybody feel comfortable together and build that trust together as a team that then allows everyone to basically create a vision that all can follow and articulate.
So now that you're at Louis Vuitton, how do you find, how to preserve this brand from the 1800s and make it relevant today? How do you keep that relevancy? I mean, I'm going to go buy Louis Vuittons, absolutely, but how do you're welcome, but how do you keep everyone else wanting to, get the newest bag, get the newest, clothing lines, the fashion shows?
Yeah.
How do you keep that interest?
Well, I should actually ask all of you, because you probably know better than I do, but what's interesting is that, and it's true of like a lot of brands I've worked on, even if I go back to my time at Kiehl's, you have to really find like what is the magic and what do these brands mean to people, And so one of the elements of Louis Vuitton is the history itself and the craftsmanship, so how the products are actually made. So we spend a lot of time now doing the storytelling around what we call the savoir-faire, so the actual crafting of the bag and talking about the different materials and the different textures and how we stitch it, and really even articulating and showing our artisans that work for us and repair bags. So if you buy a Louis Vuitton bag, by the way, for the rest of your life, you can bring it into a Louis Vuitton store, or the rest of the bag's life, and have it repaired by an artisan that we've trained in one of our artisan factories here in the United States. So it's really finding those elements that are important to the brand and being very simple in articulating what's important and what it means to clients, basically.
And so while you were at L'Oreal, I want to talk about that shift from L'Oreal to Louis Vuitton. How did that even happen? Were you looking for a change? Was something happening in your career where you were like, okay, I need to see what the next step is? How did you get to where you are now?
I wasn't, honestly, so I was at L'Oreal for 22 years and I loved my job at L'Oreal. I mean, beauty's fun, It's like I'm in meetings and you're like putting lipstick swatches on your arm, and I can put on mascara in the meeting so I didn't have to bother putting on my makeup before I got to the office in the morning, and it was fun. It's a great industry. It's very supportive of females, very supportive of working mothers, so it was a great industry to be in, and I'd been there for 22 years, so I knew the company, I knew the industry, I knew my retail partners super well. And I wasn't looking for a job, but I did get a phone call from a woman that worked at LVMH who I sort of knew a little bit, and it's unusual I even actually answer, because I don't answer my phone unless it's my children or somebody else calling, but I'm not usually answering random phone calls on my telephone, and it was this woman from LVMH who was like, Beacon, hello, anyway, how are things going? And I was like, well, hi Gina, it's so nice to meet you and talk to you again, but I'm not really interested in the job. And she's like, well, we're not hiring anyway. But we'd just love for you to go have a coffee with Mr. Arnault when you're in Paris next time. And I was like, okay, sure. I'm not going to say no to that. So the next trip I went to Paris with L'Oreal, I snuck out of a meeting, which I felt very guilty about. And I went and had a coffee with Mr. Arnault just to meet him, which was an incredible experience, by the way. He has like Picasso's hanging all over his office, and it was this like crazy door that was like whoosh, whoosh, like I felt like I was in like, you know, some like crazy like tech movie. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I sat with him for an hour and a half and we just like chatted. Meanwhile, by the way, I walked out and I was like fully sweating, pouring sweat down to my feet. I was like, oh my God. But it was an amazing moment. And anyway, I wasn't interviewing for a job, and he didn't have a job to offer me as far as I knew. But in that moment, I was like, wow, it's so nice to just go try something different and just meet somebody different and have a different conversation than I was having every single day in my L'Oreal life. So anyway, they were interviewing for a job. They just didn't want to tell me what the job was. And so about a year later, basically, I ended up starting at Louis Vuitton.
And what has been like the highlight of your time there so far?
I mean, so many, honestly. First of all, discovering the brand. I really didn't know anything about the brand and the history and the legacy. You know, it was started by Louis Vuitton himself in 1854. He was a 13-year-old boy. He basically walked from his suburban home in France to Paris without shoes and started as a packer. So he would pack women's trunks, and then he started making trunks, and he was very innovative. So he innovated trunk making from the days of cars and horses, from horses to cars to trains. So they went from being round on the back of horse-drawn carriages to let the rein fall off to being square and rectangular to be able to fit more compactly inside of the train. So anyway, very innovative and incredible company. So discovering all of that has been amazing. And we still have Louis Vuitton's house, which is called Agnières, which is just outside of Paris.
Amazing.
And we still make all of the hard-sided, so the trunks, we still make all of those pieces in Agnières, which was his house from the 1850s. So that's been incredible, you know, just discovering all that history. And then I think really discovering the world. You know, I mean, L'Oreal gave me so many opportunities to travel the world and see so many things I would have never seen, but Louis Vuitton's given me incredible opportunities. When I was in Japan in February, which I'd never been to Japan, I'm going to Marrakesh on Sunday night. I've never been to Marrakesh, you know, so it's really opened my eyes to something totally different culturally, and working on a more global scale than what I was doing necessarily at L'Oreal.
And I think talking about Louis Vuitton and the history of it, when we're talking about brands that have a lasting history, what do you think that changing force is to keep it relevant today? We're talking about AI. How do we keep the customer engaged? What are you doing at Louis Vuitton to make sure that, you know, Louis Vuitton is kind of keeping up with the times?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's interesting because with all this modernization and tech that's happening in the world, there is this very strong trend of nostalgia back to like the 90s and I mean, obviously with Love Story and Carolyn Bessette, I don't know if everyone is crazy about watching that show as I was, but I was obsessed. And then I read a book and I watched another show and like I feel like I was like totally obsessed with John F. Kennedy and Carolyn Bessette. But anyway, even before that came out, there was a lot of like nostalgia. So one is that we're always supporting icons, you know, so who are you and what is your best selling product as a brand? Doesn't matter what brand you are, but what is your best selling product and what do you stand for? And that's what you always have to be known for. So we constantly go back and reinvent those icons. So the Speedy, I don't know if anyone knows what the Speedy is, but Lily did bring it with her tonight. But there's the basic monogram Speedy, and then we innovate with different textures and different materials so that you're constantly elevating and giving opportunity
and collaborations.
And collaborations is another way in which we can reinvent icons. And then, by the way, we're also, of course, focused on modernizing. You know, so if we think about the world of AI, like we don't look at AI as a way to replace people at all. We really look at it as a way to enable people to have better productivity so that they can spend more time with the clients. You know, so a lot of the work that we do around AI today is focused on how to drive productivity in our retail stores, not to get rid of people, but so that our people can spend more time building the relationships with the clients and having those intimate one-on-one relationships is what really makes luxury brands magic. Mm-hmm. So we're constantly in that tension of icons, history, developing, evolving, modernizing, but making sure we keep that tension and never letting go of what we stand for, basically.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really special too, you allowed us to go on a tour of Louis Vuitton headquarters. And while we were walking through, you could see the different Speedies and the different collaborations. But I think on the second or third floor, there was actually an artisan drawing on the trunks, which I thought was so special because one, you've never seen that before. but we were asking her questions, like, what's the craziest thing you've drawn on one of these trunks? And she was like, I've drawn a family of 5. Like, they wanted personally customized. And so I think having that special touch of those types of products, and, you know, when I think of Louis Vuitton, I'm always going into my mom's closet and using hers, and it's like things that I can pass down to my daughter because it's such high quality.
Yes, exactly.
And you know that you can go back to the store and get it repaired and things like that.
It's timeless.
I think, and let's talk about the timelessness. I think that's what I'm getting to the essence of. What makes this brand so timeless? We hear about Louis Vuitton, but there's also the Gucci's of the world, and, you know, the Hermes, but what is making Louis Vuitton timeless?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the difference between like a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton is that we are a luxury brand, not necessarily a fashion brand. And fashion is very cyclical. So we play in fashion, and so we can have the cyclical cycles, but we also are a house of travel and a house of culture, you know. And so we really started, like the Speedy, for example, was a bag that comes from the Keepall, which is a larger suitcase that was shrunk down for Grace Kelly because she wanted a smaller version to be able to travel on the airplane. So we are a very functional luxury house, which allows us to be more timeless versus Gucci, which is going to end up being more cyclical. So now with Gucci's new designer, Demna, that's come on board, they're getting better in terms of business. Hermes is more similar. You know, obviously they have the background of horses and saddlery, but they are, you know, more about timelessness than they are necessarily about fashion. It just so happens that their timelessness creates fashion, just like Louis Vuitton.
Love it. I want to dig into your personal life a little bit. I think as a new mom, I'm really trying to figure out how do I balance professional life, mom life, be able to be there for all the things in between. I think as you've ascended throughout your career, how have you made it a point to be able to be there for the moments that you need to with your children and your family?
Yeah. Well, hopefully I've been there for the moments that matter. Yes, Lily. I'm sure not every single one, but I love you, honey.
But I think that, first of all, I have an amazing husband who's extremely supportive, and I have amazing children that are also super supportive of my career, which is very helpful. And the way that I don't think there's any right answer. You know, you have to always just see like how you feel and how you dance every single day. But I always have said that you have to set boundaries, and you have to set very clear boundaries of where you feel comfortable. And you also have to know that sometimes the boundaries have to be slightly flexible, but you have to come back to your core, you know, and sometimes work is going to need you to give just a little bit more than home, and sometimes home is going to need you to give a little bit more than work. And so by defining the boundaries, it at least gives you a framework in which you can sort of give and take from. And I think I've also always had very supportive bosses, honestly. You know, I mean, I live in Long Island, so I commute on the Long Island Railroad, so I really you know, growing up when my children were still in day school, I took them to school every day, and then I took a train, so I got in a little bit later than everybody else. But my boss was okay with that. It didn't mean I wasn't doing the work, it's just that it was really important to me to drop my kids off at school every day, and it was really important for me to be home at night, so I left at 5 o'clock to catch the train, and then I'd put them to bed and I'd do my work. So it's like those were, my boundary was I need to spend time with my children. Obviously I have to be in the office, but how can you work with me to sort of get around it? And then I really like to try now and give that same flexibility to moms that work with me, you know, and by the way, and dads too. It's not easy doing what we all have to do every single day. There's a lot of demands on us no matter what they are, but there's a lot of demands pushing and pulling. So day by day. Don't look too far in the future, and I promise also it will work out.
Thanks, because
it will.
My 13-month-old is so sassy.
I know.
And we're just trying to figure it out.
And you have your nice mom too.
I know. And I don't want to like stick babysitting on her all the time, but I'm like, girl, I need to get my nails done. I'm so tired.
Well, then, by the way, very soon you can take her to get your nails done with you.
I know. I'm so looking forward to that.
That's really nice. We still do it together.
We're at the point now where, I'll just share a little bit, we're working on eating solids and all of the things, and so Jackson is very sassy. So now when you give her something to eat and she doesn't like it, she'll give you a damsel in distress. And I'm like, I don't know where you got that from. And John was like, you know exactly where she got that from, So it's a very fun time in the house, but I feel like I'm I'm trying to get up really early so that I can get work done, but then also try to, be present and be in the moment and see the little things of her walking and her developing her personality. It's a great time.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's also you're still adapting, better word. It's a big change. 13 months is like, think about your whole life, and it's only 13 months, so it takes time to adapt also, both of you.
Yeah, and how are you supporting moms? Where at Louis Vuitton, how did you support moms at L'Oreal?
Yeah, I mean, so we have working mom groups, that I would always go and speak at L'Oreal and things like that, and but just as a manager, I'm always, obviously there are rules everyone has to play by. We have to be in the office 4 days a week, for example, at Louis Vuitton. I can't say to someone, oh, you can work from home 3 days and only come to the office 2. So you have to keep the same base work, but I stay very focused on being flexible, making sure that we have meetings at times that work for everybody else. So not having meetings before 9 o'clock, for example, trying not to have any meetings after 5 o'clock, really allowing people to have as much, flexibility around the office hours as you possibly can, and listening. What needs do you have as an employee? What do you need us to do as a company different to support you in the world that we live in today?
So on that note, where do you find inspiration outside of work, and how do you use that in your everyday, day-to-day leadership?
I think I love to read, business books, but also fun books. I love to be outside, so I feel like I find a lot of inspiration and clarity from being outside, hiking, walking, spending time with my dogs, clearing my brain, my mind, so that I can sort of be free, and that sort of gives me more creative juices and more preparedness for the week as it starts every Monday. And traveling, I love, what do you guys call me? The Doge. This is their joke from when we went to Italy. And I would be such a dork, with, listening to the tour guides talking about all the amazing things with the headphones on, and I'd be asking a question, and my kids were like, oh my God, you're such a loser, Mom. I'm this is so incredible. This is from whatever, 0 BC, whatever it was. And so anything that gets me out of my usual routine, I think, is where I find.
And when you think, whether it's in your career or outside of your career, what's a risk that you took that didn't pay off the way you expected? And then what did you learn from that?
Well, that's a good one. Maybe, I don't know, there's probably a few. I think the body shop is one. It paid off, I guess, in some ways from a career, but not in a lot of ways it paid off. I learned a lot, and it advanced me a lot at L'Oreal by doing that job. But it wasn't easy. It was a really difficult job. And I think even leaving L'Oreal and moving to Louis Vuitton, I think in the end, risks aren't bad. You have to take calculated risks. But actually, I think they provide you opportunities. And I think I'm teaching my own self a lesson, which is that, you can't keep your doors closed to what's out there, and you have to be open to new ideas and try them. But have it calculated so that that if it doesn't work, how can you pivot, where do you go from there?
And so how do you approach those decisions? Are you kind of calculating? Are you beautiful minds? Does this go here? Does this go
Well,
there?
a little bit, probably. Louis Vuitton, definitely. But also, it was okay, in the end, I should just go try. Why not? But yes, there was a lot of calculating, what do I love about what I do, but also what don't I love about what I do anymore? And if I really took a step back and thought about, in some ways I wasn't as challenged as I wanted to be anymore. And I was at the time, 47-ish, 48 maybe. And I was what am I going to do this for the next 10, 12 years, exactly what I've been doing for 22. Maybe I should just go try something else. And so on the one hand, it was very calculated. It took me a long time to decide. And then when I chose, I just went. And then I got there and I was wait, what have I done? But so it was both calculated and fast, I would say.
So just inquiring minds, do you feel there's a language barrier, because Louis Vuitton's in France and based in France? Do you feel like you're, on your Duolingo?
Yeah, so I did try Duolingo, by the way, and I was super into it, and now my poor little Duolingo app, I don't know if anyone uses it here, but the app face is like, oh, because I never use it anymore, but I really did try. But by the way, I worked for a French company now for 25 years, and I never learned French, which shame on me. But it's fine, actually. I mean, the thing is like, I'm American, and I'm like super proud of being an American, and I speak English, and they all knew I only spoke English. LVMH is a much more French-speaking company than L'Oreal was, honestly. But I just go with it. If they really want me to know what they're saying, they'll say it in English. Otherwise, I'm not going to know what they're talking about.
What I also find interesting is that a lot of these companies, they're headed by males.
Yeah.
Or, their customers are solely women. So how do you make sure that your seat at the table is making sure that the customer is always reflected in the work that you do?
Yeah, I don't think of it as, I never think of it that way, actually, even though it's true. I mean, it is true. Both companies, by the way, have advanced women tremendously. Like, if I just take L'Oreal as an example, when I started, there's something called the Strategic Committee, which is like, the top committee of L'Oreal USA. And when I started, it was all men. And there are 4 business units that report into the Strategic Committee. So I ran the Luxe division, and then there was the Consumer Products division, the Active Cosmetics division, and Professional. When I left, all 4 were women, and all 4 were American women. By the way, when I started, it was all men and Frenchmen.
Wow.
So they were very supportive of women, and I think the Strategic Committee was basically like 60% women, 40% men, and only like, a 20-year time span. It's a pretty fast evolution. And LVMH too, I mean, it's a lot of men at the very top, obviously, but they're really making a very pronounced effort to support women and the ambitions that they have to have 50% of leadership be women in positions. So I never feel, that it's gender-based, and it's interesting because the men it's their job, so they don't know, they're not a woman, but they know it quite well, sometimes better than me. It's pretty impressive, actually.
So when you're in those rooms, what is it like, what are those conversations like? I mean, we don't have to go like in depth, but like, are you challenging them? Are they challenging you?
It's both. Mm-hmm. It's both, for sure. Different environments, cultures. L'Oreal was much more of a challenging culture, so they were always challenging me. Louis Vuitton is a little bit more of a passive culture, so they'll definitely challenge, but we're challenging them more. I'm challenging them more probably than they are challenging me, because I'm the one that knows this market and they know product. So I'm trying to get the right product for this market. So I have to challenge them to say, you know what, in the United States we really need zippers on our bags, because women really don't like walking around without zippers on their bags. And they're like, oh, these Americans, but I need zippers, otherwise I can't sell any bags, so.
And do they put the zippers on?
They do. As a matter of fact, we've got a lot of bags with zippers right now in case anyone needs a new handbag. We've got some good ones in stock.
Love it, love that.
But they do listen, but you have to just be able to give that feedback.
And I think something else that's interesting is that Louis Vuitton is getting into the beauty business.
Yes.
And just signed on Pat McGrath as creative director. She had Pat McGrath Labs. So now, when you walk into the store, there's a beauty section. It's not just bags and scarves and jewelry. So, what is it kind of taking this brand to the next level and introducing new outlets for people to dive into when they go into these stores?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because the lipsticks are a little expensive, I have to say. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how many people are buying $160 lipsticks because they just want a piece of Louis Vuitton. And we build categories over time. This is a brand that's been around since 1854, and we had first handbags, then we go into textiles, then we go into fashion accessories. We also have a high jewelry collection that we now sell, high watchmaking. So for us, beauty was the next most ideal frontier for us to start to tackle, and we started small. We had fragrances already, which do a great business for us, and then we started small with just a lipstick collection, which we'll be expanding over time. But it really pulls the whole world of artistry together in fashion shows. Like Pat McGrath has been doing the makeup for Louis Vuitton fashion shows with Nicola Jeschier for 10 years. So it totally made sense for them to have this collaboration from a lipstick point of view. So.
And so what are like, when people come into the stores, are they just looking for the bags? Like, what do you hear from what is the need?
Yeah, in terms of what they're looking for when they walk in the store. A lot of times people don't even know what they're looking for. They're like, can you help me today? And so we really work on giving, and it's not perfect, so I'm sure some of you have been in the store and it has not been like this, but it's a big focus of us, but giving everyone the same client experience, whether you're a repeating client or a new client. We really want to be about welcoming you into our stores, into our house, our maison as we call it. And then we will, work with you and ask you the right probing questions to get you the right place. Sometimes they'll also come in with a picture of something that they saw, Taylor Swift was wearing last weekend, like I want this skirt, or I want these boots, and then it's very specific and you take them more clearly to that place. But it really depends. There's lots of different ways in which people come in, and we just ask the right questions to get them to the right place.
And when you talk about, kind of the difference, contrast, compared L'Oreal to Louis Vuitton, what is really the biggest difference you've seen in terms of like marketing strategies or, how you're connecting to the customers in each one of those?
L'Oreal is much more outside marketing, so like social media, influencer partnerships, a lot of paid media, whereas Louis Vuitton, we do some of that, but we spend a lot less on the outside and we spend a lot of time focusing on the client and really building that one-on-one relationship, so the client advisors really becomes your person. And it's incredible, these relationships. I meet clients all the time, they're like, you don't even know you have the best team in the entire industry, like your team's incredible, we love them, they do this for us, they do that for us, they know the babies, they know the grandbabies, they know all of the stuff. So for us, that's the big difference, is how we take care of our clients versus L'Oreal. You don't know your clients, you're sort of like splaying all the information out there and you see what sticks.
And for people that are really trying to rise up in their career, I feel like we hear about, women in these top jobs, but we don't necessarily know how they get there or, what their mentors told them or what advice they were following. So what's the best piece of advice you've heard that you followed throughout your career that kind of was like a stick true, like this has worked for me?
The most important is never let anyone know what you don't know. Like, there is no reason for anyone in this room to ever say what they don't know, because you know a lot more than you think you know. And I remember somebody told me that at my very first job I had at Estee Lauder, and I was like, what does she mean by that? I was like a 23-year-old, like, little person having a lot of fun in New York City. Mm-hmm. And she was right, there are so many situations, I have no idea what the person's talking about. And you just listen, they don't need to know you don't know what they're talking about, and usually you work it out later and you'll figure it out, but they don't need to know what you don't know.
I love that.
Yeah, see?
I want to make sure that we have time for questions, so if you have questions, get those brewing in your minds, but we have a couple of questions before we get to that. So when we talk about your career at L'Oreal, there are a number of brands that you were over. So how do you make sure that you're continually focusing, you're able to know this is for this brand, this is for this brand, this is for this brand, and not be able to get so consumed and overwhelmed by taking on so much at work?
Yeah. Honestly, people always ask me, like, you must be so busy in your job now. And I'm like, I am, but I'm so much less busy than I used to be, because running 15 brands versus one brand, it was very difficult, I have to say. It was way too many brands.
Different demographics, different marketing strategies, different targets, everything. Yeah.
Everything. And so in that job, I really had to find out what were the right questions to ask to get the right answer. And you could tell, even if I didn't know what the right answer was, I could just tell by the way people responded to me if it was correct or not, and that's when you knew that you had to, so it's like I really had to really skim the surface on a lot of topics, which I like to be much more authentic and build and spend time. But I had to really skim the surface and really read the room a lot, to be honest. And it was a lot of work, a lot of meetings. I would be very tired at the end of the week.
And that's when we talk about how do you manage both, right? You have these long days, you have these probably long nights sometimes, meetings are running over, but then you have to go home and beyond.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for a lot of people. I'm still going back to that question, how do you still balance that and be able to say, okay, I know I have work during the day, but I've still got to be on for my kids at night?
I mean, the Long Island Railroad has been like my best friend, which I can't believe I'm saying that. I don't know if anyone in this room takes the Long Island Railroad, but love-hate relationship I have with the train.
Mm-hmm.
But the love part I have with the train, when I can get a seat, is that I can like really sit down on the Long Island Railroad and like, as crazy as that sounds, but like you can really decompress. Like I don't know anyone on the train, I'm by myself, nobody's talking to me, I know I'm gonna get home at a certain time, and it's my time to just like, and maybe you like to read a book or listen to a podcast. I just like to be like, nothing. And that was my time. And then so by the time I got home, you know, I could be ready to tackle the next wave. I am also very lucky and grateful. My husband nicely makes dinner, so I don't have to worry about that.
Oh my gosh.
Which is very nice. And he is a better cook, as my children like to say.
Is that you, Lily?
Yeah.
So I've just given up. I'm like, perfect, I don't need to cook anymore.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to a little rapid fire round with
Okay,
you.
great.
So in my mind, in your office at Louis Vuitton headquarters, you have a closet that has a computer screen like Clueless, and you get to scroll through and pick your jacket for the day, and pick your skirt for the day, and pick the bag for the day, and pick the shoe for the day. Is that true?
No computer, but we have 2 closets that are very fun to go shopping in. Lily Graham also likes to go shopping in the closets as well.
Wow.
And it is amazing because I can go down and be like, can I borrow this ring? Can I borrow this dress? Can I borrow these shoes? And you just take it and you borrow it and it's fun. And then, by the way, you don't have to feel badly when you're tired of it, you can just give it back.
Because it's not yours.
It's not mine, I have to buy it. It's amazing. The best is when you go through the airports and we're traveling together.
Yeah.
As a team, and everyone has a lot of Louis Vuitton, and everyone at the airport's like, oh my gosh, you know, nice suitcase, and we're all like, we work there.
It's not really ours.
It's not really ours, it's all fake. I mean, it's real, but it's not really ours.
I love it. What is your favorite Louis Vuitton moment? Or no, that's not the question. What's your favorite Louis Vuitton of the moment? Or what is one everyone should get their hands on?
This is my new favorite bag. This is called the Express. It's a great bag, so it's like fits everything in it. It's like super soft leather. I can like throw it in my bag.
It's got a zipper.
It's got a zipper. It's got a compartment on the inside. It can get wet. It doesn't matter. You have short strap. You have long straps. It can be crossbody. It's very multifunctional. So this is my favorite right now.
What is a morning routine that keeps you grounded?
Walking my dogs and Pilates. Walking my dogs outside, obviously.
Yes, fresh air.
Yes. And it would be great if I was on 131 School Road, but
I know.
I can't really have that right now.
Walking past the marsh, but you definitely don't want to go marshing looking out.
No.
We'll leave that out of there.
Yes.
What are 3 beauty products that you can't live without?
Kiehl's avocado eye cream is the best eye cream, but you have to apply it properly. So just like dab it and then let it soak and then rub it gently. It's amazing eye cream. I'm obsessed with this micellar water, which I can't remember the brand. Do you remember the brand? Anyway, it's amazing. I can't think of the brand, but it has a pump, and I put the cotton pads on it and wipe my makeup off, and it's super easy, and I'm obsessed with it.
One swipe.
One swipe, and it's all off. And my last beauty product I can't live without is McCreen Active Skincare. She's a dermatologist up the street. She's amazing, and she makes incredible skincare.
Okay, this is 2-part. What's the last book you read?
Well, I'm in the middle of it right now. What was the book I read right before that? I see, the problem is now I read my books on the Kindle, so I never know what the names are because it doesn't put it at the top. But I've read Strangers recently.
Oh, I heard that was good.
It's very good. Did you guys read it? Belle Burton's book.
Scandalous.
Really Scandalous, Page Turner. And also right now I'm reading Justice Kennedy's memoirs, which are very good. Super interesting history. And I also read another book that was like Jenna Hager's book club. I don't know what it was called, to be honest, but it's very good too.
I heard Strangers was very
Strangers is very good.
And it's on Oprah's book club list.
Yes,
so
it is.
Put that
And
there.
she just interviewed her.
She did,
Yeah.
on her podcast.
Yeah.
Do you have a passion or hobby that most people don't know about?
Do I?
Reading.
Reading. Yeah, most
Do you
people.
like to knit?
No, because I can't see. I like to watch Lily Stitch. My sister-in-law taught me how to play Mahjong on Friday, which I loved.
Oh, I heard that was very fun.
She's a very good teacher, and it was really fun.
I heard that's a good game.
It's a good game. I really liked it. I do love to read. I mean, I love to garden. I have a small garden, but I love it. I don't know. Watch TV with my husband. We're watching Victoria right now.
What is that?
Some movie about Queen Victoria. It's pretty good, actually.
Okay.
Interesting.
What is your definition of success and how has it changed from 10 years ago?
I mean, for me, the most important measure of success, honestly, is like the happiness of my family. You know, my kids, my dogs, my husband, and that really is my most important measure of success. And if that's not in the place it needs to be, I think it's very difficult to feel success, honestly.
Paris or New York?
Definitely Paris. No offense to New York. I love New York. But every time I go to Paris, which is a lot, every time I go there, I can't believe like what a magical, incredible city it is.
And why is that? Food?
Food, the light,
the architecture,
the gardens, the architecture, the people. I mean, the whole thing. It's such an awesome city.
And
the language.
Oh, yeah. Well,
even though I don't speak it.
Duolingo is
right.
down at the bottom. One travel non-negotiable.
Water. I drink a lot of water. So when I get on the plane going to Paris, I literally have 3-liter bottles. And
do you like water up in the airport, like? I'm
very bad about plastics at the airport, and I buy them, which is really bad. Sorry, never work on that.
I'm fine with it.
I know it's bad. I feel guilty, but I need to have a lot of water, and I can't carry around all those water bottles everywhere.
What's the first luxury item you bought yourself?
I wasn't really like a luxury person, honestly, before I worked at Louis Vuitton. I feel like probably, what was it? What do you think of the first luxury item I bought myself? Oh, you're right, Lily Grant. Good memory. That's true. When I was in New York, the Jackie bag at Gucci was just coming back. I bought the nylon version, which had the leather trim, so it was definitely the least expensive version you possibly could, but that was the first thing I bought with my paycheck back in the day.
And this is probably my favorite question of the bunch. What's the craziest thing in your purse right now, or something you have to carry with you right now?
Well, the craziest is my little seat pad. So I have a hip problem, so I have this little hip pad that I carry around with me everywhere. By the way, and that's the other thing that my French colleagues love when I show up in Paris with my seat pad and these beautiful dinners, these insane flowers,
Hold
and
on, I
everything's
have to put my
perfect,
seat
and I
pad
have to
down.
pull out my black seat pad. They're like, oh my God. But I carry it with me everywhere, every airplane and every chair, and it helps me so much. And it's in my bag at all times, and everybody makes fun of me, but it really helps me.
And
it makes me feel really old.
a lasting word or piece of advice for our group here from Millbrook, from School Road, from, career-wise, mom-wise, something we can leave the room with.
I think just everything is day by day. You just take all of life day by day, and you do the best you can every single day, and leverage your people, your resources, your network. I mean, Millbrook's an incredible network. It's so awesome that they do this for their alumni and all the other alumni, events that they hold, and obviously your colleges, and then, careers, and just use your network, leverage your people, and just take life day by day.
I love it. So we'll open up the floor for some questions. I know you don't need a mic, Kathleen, so do you want one? There's a mic right here. Do you want it?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Told you.
So Millbrook was founded in 1931, and I work for a company that was founded in 1922. And we're all here today, almost 100 years later for Millbrook and 100 years later for my company. So how have you navigated, particularly I think at LVMH, how have you navigated where you have an obligation, you've joined this organization because you revere its history, but at the same time, if it were to just stay in this path of its history, it probably wouldn't be here today,
right.
Number one, and number two, you probably wouldn't want to be there anymore.
Right.
So I'm really curious, I deal with this every day. How do you handle honoring the history in a way that allows you to be excellent today.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the brand.
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. I mean, I think that, you know, brand DNA is, you have to be very clear on what your brand DNA is, you know, and so we really focus on house of travel, house of culture, house of craftsmanship, and that's really the DNA of our brand in summation. And then there are legacy parts of each of those tenets of our brand, if you will. And then there's how can you modernize pieces of those tenets, you know? And it's not as if, you know, the bags or the designs are necessarily modernized, but the approach becomes more modernized, or the store becomes more modernized, you know, or we're using different finishes that perhaps have a bit more modernity than what you would have found. But I think always with a harken back to before, you know, I mean, to the heritage, to the roots. And I do think it's a very delicate balance, but what we like to say in the industry is like forever brands, you know, and forever brands have a real story to tell, and you have to keep telling that story. You know, your founder story, the story of Louis Vuitton, the story of his son, and then the story of his grandson. You know, these are all like very powerful stories that make the brand so relevant and so iconic, you know, and you have to really go back to those roots to tell them. And then, you know, there are probably more behind the scenes in terms of modernization and making sure you can facilitate ways of working in modern ways, I would say.
I saw somebody else. Yes. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Second row. Yep.
Hello, my name is Hanji. I'm class of 21, and currently I'm studying industrial design at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Great.
So it's interesting when you mentioned the intersection of craftsmanship and artisan, also design, because it's when you're working in the role of a designer, you're doing these research for a market, you're like trying to figure out what people want, doing surveys, and you end up having a lot of compromises on the eventual form.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, wait, the market wants that. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be making what your personal taste is.
Yeah.
Because the market wants that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Louis Vuitton has like a high-end, bespoke design for some clients
Yeah.
that they can request, oh,
Yes.
I want this,
Yeah.
and do that for me. Like people who have the vision of what they want from your brand, and also this mass market of people who want to choose a Louis Vuitton. So I wonder what are the distinctions between those, and how do you make decisions for those separate markets?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, one is that we are very careful not to like banalize our designs with feedback too much, you know? I mean, like we can say you need a zipper, you know, but that's like a very functional need. But I think we try to be the studios of the house. So we have a women's studio that's run by Nicola Jeskier and a men's studio that's run by Pharrell Williams. Like they're really in charge of the design and the aesthetics and the codes of the brand and what they want to articulate in their collections. And yes, there's some feedback, but we really try and let the creative process flow, because all of a sudden if you start to take feedback from every single market, at the end of the day you're getting something that is like a summation of parts and it's not really a creation anymore, you know? And so that's one, is like we try and do it that way. And then of course there are like certain categories that are more China-centric versus US-centric, you know? I mean, like a crossbody bag is a very American function where you wouldn't necessarily, you know, in China they don't necessarily want a crossbody bag. So they may take more inputs from the US market on the crossbody approach. But we really are very careful to keep design. And so we take bets, you know, not every bag is gonna work. I mean, we launch a lot of handbags every single year and not every one is gonna work. And we take calculated bets in terms of which ones we believe in and which ones we don't. And the way that our supply chain works allows us to scale up or down like rather quickly. So that's sort of how we manage the process so that we don't wash out the design function or features or creation. I don't know if that helps. It's not easy.
Can I have a follow-up?
You sure can.
So what brought me into this field is because when I is when I see products and I say, I wish that's a little different for my particular body type or for my particular needs. So I'm in this field to make something. And what ends up happening is, oh, I realize that I'm not actually designing for myself anymore. I need to make a living by designing for other people's needs, and I should ignore my own, aesthetic in there.
Right.
And I wonder if there's ever going to be a moment where people say, I like that a lot, and I want to make it instead of I want to have it.
I mean, I think so. I think we go through phases of that, to be honest, like cycles of where people are wanting to do it themselves, but then, they come back to a place where, not that they want to be told, but they want to be shown, and you can also personalize what you're shown. So there is an element of personalization that's really important in the market, whether it's your little initials that we put on it, or like bag charms is a way that people have been personalizing their bags as of late, again, as an example. So there's always this blend, but I would say that in the end, most people still want what's created versus they don't have, like, you have that vision. A lot of people don't have that vision, so you have a very unique vision of what you want to craft. Not everyone has that, so they want what's out there and then they want to customize it or personalize it themselves. But I think it's always an ebb and flow.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, I see you.
Hi, I'm Corinne. I'm class of 2017. And something I was thinking about as you were talking, and you specifically said that you don't rely on influencer marketing as much, but more the relationship with the consumer. It got me thinking about how about 4 years ago, that Neverfull had like a huge resurgence on social media. And if I'm not mistaken, it was extremely organic. It was just, creators kind of being like, oh, I found my Neverfull. It's so cool, you can wear it. So how, from your perspective, while not relying heavily on influencer marketing, do you kind of realize the value in it and kind of use it to further cultivate relationships?
Yeah, well, I see a lot of value in it. I mean, I really believe in the power of influencer marketing. Louis Vuitton is very careful because having others speak on behalf of your brand without control is like very unsettling for Louis Vuitton as a brand. So that example is we couldn't have been happier when that happened, because the minute that starts going viral on TikTok and Instagram, you see the sales in the stores. By the way, the same things happen with the Speedy and another model we have called the Alma, which the business is up like 126%, so we love when that happens. And in some ways, obviously, brands are making those kinds of things happen. It's almost better in a way when it's organic, because it is much more authentic. And I think that's why we stay away from like the mass seeding and, we never pay influencers unless they're like, celebrities basically. But other than that, we never pay influencers. And I think that sticks to the authenticity. But honestly, I think it's super powerful and I think it's super important as part of your media mix.
And we'll do one more question. I saw one more hand right here. Yep.
I was curious, having been in the beauty, fashion, luxury industry for over 2 decades, what do you think are 2 or 3 characteristics, whether technical or non-technical, that it takes for women to succeed in these industries?
Yeah. I mean, I think one is a very deep understanding of the market, of the products. I mean, I always say to people, the most important thing in this industry, beauty or fashion, is shopping. Go shopping. Go shopping online, spend time with your favorite brands. What do you like about it? But even in, Walmarts and Targets and places where it's really about retail and consumption, what do you see? And because I think that your own perspective is really important, and the best way to get your perspective is by doing it yourself. So I think harvesting that perspective is super important. 2 is, I think there's, I always say that every single day make the most impact you possibly can. It doesn't matter what the job is you're doing, but how do you make the most impact in that day? I mean, when I worked at Estee Lauder way back in the day, I worked for a brand called Prescriptives, and I was like hired as a permanent temp, and I was paid hourly, and one of my jobs was to stock the product closet with product. I mean, it's so boring, but I did it, you know, and by the way, I read all the packaging of all the products, and I knew everything about the products and what they did and all the shades. And I mean, it's not big impact, but I was making impact still every day by putting these products away in an organized fashion for the people that needed to pull a product quickly from. So I think whatever it is that you're doing, even if something you don't like, make impact. And then the third thing I would say is build your network. I mean, it's really important, both inside and outside of the industry, you know, of whatever industry that you're in. You know, I have so many connections from L'Oreal that show up all the time, by the way, at Louis Vuitton, you know, and, you know, I mean, 2 weeks ago I was on an airplane with my team going to Chicago, and like 10 people from my old L'Oreal team were on the airplane, you know, and they had connections with this person, or you know, so you're constantly, that network is so important, and as you get more later in your career, the network becomes even more important, whether it's hiring people or people to hire you, or, you know, connections with media agencies, or whatever it is that you need, you have people that you can depend on and you can trust and you can call on. So I think it's super important that you build that over time. And of course, when you build networks, it's always good not to burn any bridges as you're building them.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Rock star.
And thank you everyone for coming out to join us today. This is a new format, but I really enjoyed it. You know, being able to hear from one of the leaders in the beauty industry is something we don't really get to see a lot of the times, and we don't get to hear their perspectives and hear the stories. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Nancy. I'll have to let you take it over. Are we done?
I just wanted to thank Nina again for hosting this.
Yes.
And also to just say, listening to you talk about Louis Vuitton and the product and how you stay so true to what you're thinking about reminds me of schools and mission, and how it's so important for schools to stay true to their mission.
I totally agree.
If you lose sight of your mission, you're going to lose sight of everything you're doing.
That's right.
And what's important for the schools.
That's
so
right.
I just wanted to sort of just say that as a remark, and I think that, I mean, clearly, Louis Vuitton has a great mission. So thank you so much.
Well, so does Millbrook. So perfect tie.
Thank you.